There is a new AI in town that is stopping scammers. I know we hear a lot about this, this AI fear stuff that, oh my gosh, the AI is going to be used to perpetrate millions of scams. And while there's definitely going to be bad actors that are using a lot of these tools, I think most of the serious platforms are doing a pretty good job of trying to put limits on there and shut that kind of stuff down. And it's going to be a cat and mouse game forever. You obviously can use technology of any kind to do good and bad. But Google is taking a new step with their Nano model to essentially thwart scams, and they're running this on your device, meaning you don't have to be connected to the internet, and this saves a lot of headaches. It's going to do some really interesting things. Connor, kicking this over to you, what are you most impressed with this whole nano scam detection and stopping technology?
Yeah, well, first of all, we hear a lot about all the different models. Like there's, Claude, Haiku, Sonnet, Opus, and Gemini's the same way, right? They have all their, 2.5 Pro and everything else. But Google Nano, I hadn't heard much about, or I just hadn't used it. But the question I get all the time, Jaeden, and you and I talk about all the time, is when people are skeptical, which is totally understandable. We should be skeptical of things, where people will say like, well, isn't this just going to, ruin everybody's lives? Essentially AI, it can start scamming, and it does that. And by the way, when I go out and I talk about this stuff, like one of the first things I say is that this is one of the big existential risks, right? With the fact that it can create fake videos, fake images, fake voice, everything like that. It's going to scam us like crazy. And personalization.
Right.
I can't, if you guys are anything like me, and Jaeden, you and I get these things too, right? These like scams are getting more and more personalized. Right. I'm like, how do they know I live here? And how do they know I do this? Right. So that's terrifying for folks. So this is why I loved this story, which came out either today or yesterday, Jaeden. I can't remember. But just the fact that Gemini is really, and Google is really focused on it. Because my answer to this is always, yes, of course, they have this great weapon, but we, the good guys, have a great weapon as well. And AI is being used to stop a lot of this stuff. With, as Jaeden said, with any bad acting technology, you have a good acting technology to help it, right? Think sort of like nuclear proliferation and things like that. But just to sort of like get into it for a second. So Google is essentially just it's ramping up this whole notion that we should stop online scams, which by the way, Jaeden, I also think is going to just be a huge public win. Do you know what I mean? Like just like sort of
Totally.
in the how, in public sentiment. And so they're integrating into Chrome everything, right? So the idea is that on Chrome desktop, for example, so it's going to have this what they call like enhanced protection mode, right? And that's Chrome has this whole safe browsing thing, but so when they visit sites, what's actually happening is Gemini Nano, which is a model of Gemini, it's going to analyze the page content real time, generate security signals essentially. So like, oh, it's detecting scam intent or suspicious behavior or something like that. And then those signals are sent to the browsing service. It decides if it's a scam. If so, Chrome warns the user. So at first it's supposed to just like block like, remote tech or remote, tech support scams and things like that, where like fake pop-ups try to trick users into, calling fake numbers, which by the way, like my mom just happened to her like recently.
Now,
This is what happens with our parents, right? But as Jaden's also saying, when this happens on device, it's just amazing. This is why I think they're using Nano, because you want a small model to be able to do this. But the real time on device protection is huge. The other thing that it seems to actually be working, I just saw this one thing. Where was this? It said Google reports. Sorry, here it is. Google reports that AI systems have reduced scammy search results by 80% in some categories, such as airline customer service, impersonation. Oh my gosh, scams where they impersonate somebody. I can't talk. But Jane, this is the reason I like this, and the reason I wanted to bring it up today is that this is the kind of thing that actually means something to people every single day. If like, can this help me with all this scam stuff? Scam stuff is only getting worse. And if AI can, sort of swoop in and save the day, and you're using a model like Gemini, which is arguably the most powerful model out there, and it's not just a powerful model, but you're using Nano, which is a small model which can fit on device. This feels like it has real world implications that I find super exciting.
yeah, so there's a couple things that happened this week that just are kind of blowing my mind. But so I'll talk about this first and I'll reference another story. But what's interesting here, like you mentioned, it's on device. And it makes me think, something like this could definitely at some point replace all of these. We have like these virus softwares like McAfee and
Right. Norton. Yeah.
yeah, Norton, like all those kind of things, which I'd feel like are largely just their own virus of people to uninstall them off your device anyways. But that's just me.
Not sponsored by either of those companies, clearly.
Yeah, they come pre-installed. Yeah, if we get a Norton sponsorship, I'll stop tearing into them. But so what's interesting to me though is I feel like these types of AI tools are going to start replacing that, right? Like if you have something like Nano that's literally on device, like what's the difference between an antivirus software? Like this thing technically can run through your computer if you give it permissions. It can look at what you're seeing if it has vision, and it can tell you what types of software things look like scams based off of an algorithm that it's been trained on. Like to me, this you could just train or fine tune one of these models to be that. And it's interesting because I wonder at what level McAfee or Norton or these other things like kind of have those tools, but now all of a sudden it's like just super easy plug and play. Their algorithms are kind of getting replaced by this. So that's one thing that I do think is interesting. And I do think it's a very important thing that they are on device because you don't need the internet. So if a scammer for some reason is calling your mom on the phone and tells her to disconnect the internet so he can make her get some do some nefarious things, then reconnect and whatever. Like there's all these shady things you can do. Having it on device will eliminate that, I guess, like security loophole, the on or off internet. So I think that's cool. But what's more interesting to me is that these AI models essentially are starting to replace like software that we had on device or things that used to just software would do them. And now all of a sudden the AI model is like replacing the algorithm. It's replacing the brain of what the software did. So I think that's interesting. And the other story that happened this week that kind of is making me think about this in a new way is that Elon Musk tweeted and said that on X, his social media platform, formerly Twitter, the algorithm is, he said, we're getting rid of our algorithm or we're just replacing it with Grok. And I was like, what the heck does that even mean? Like, how do you do that? And when you think about these things, like these algorithms, and Mark Zuckerberg has been saying it for like, I don't know, the last couple of years. He's like, look, over at Meta, we've been using AI for ages. Like your algorithm and how we get your timeline is just an AI algorithm. And so, but it's interesting to think that like when you say AI algorithm, I still just think a bunch of ones and zeros on a server. And I'm not like thinking about like a literal LLM technically is the same brain in a way. And so when you think about Grok, it's just like, okay, Grok, here's all the data that's ever been published on Twitter in the last 5 seconds. This is who the user subscribed to. This is what they've liked in the past. Which of these do you think they would like? And Grok's like, oh, they'd probably like this and this and this and this. And it's like, it's just interesting that we're like all of a sudden taking an LLM and making it run the algorithm or do the algorithm in a way. It's just so fascinating to me.
Personalizing. Well, let me ask you that, Jane, because I'd heard that story, but I didn't follow it, and I didn't read about it. I just heard somebody sort of saying it almost about Grok.
Right.
What's the difference? I mean, is it the difference between using a large language model and not using a large language model? I don't know how much you have on this. We're sort of like
I
just doing
think
we do everything on the fly, by the way, just behind the scenes. Jaeden and I literally just do all this on the fly. We do very little prep and research and stuff like that. We know the topics, but sometimes when we go new, I'm like, oh man, can we talk about that? But have you seen much about that, Jaeden? Like,
So, okay, so I think one of the main differences between going for like their algorithm to this is technically they're both algorithms and they're both AI, but one of the big differences might be how easy it is to interface with. So sometimes algorithms can be a bit of a black box. And I was told at some point, so definitely hearsay on this, but like TikTok's algorithm was a bit of a black box. It was very hard for people to even understand like all of the reasons why it worked. They pretty much just said, hey, train like an AI model to keep people on the platform, keep them engaged. But like they don't necessarily know why it does everything it does all the time or recommends all the videos it recommends. I mean, allegedly, according to them, this is something that they'll probably say if they're like, why did I get recommended this video that's like horrible? And they're like, oh, it's a bit of a black box. We don't know. With something like Grok, it's like very literal and you can tweak the algorithm live. It's like, okay, I want everyone to, get videos that are going to keep them engaged. And it's like, okay, but like, let's lower the amount of like rage bait videos people get by like 20%. Okay, let's lower the amount of like you could probably in like a very real way interface and talk with it in a way that, I don't know, maybe an algorithm was trained a certain way and now it's like stuck that way and you got to retrain it, like retrain some sort of fine-tuned model to change it. Whereas Grok, it seems like, or any LLM, you could, I'm just hypothesizing here, you could probably just like change it on the fly with some prompts. So
well, this is what I love about this too, is that the personalization of all this is amazing. I'm going to take us back to a super simple example. Like, in like ChatGPT, I was trying to get, I can't remember, I think I was posting about this. I was trying to get like a book recommendation, right? So Netflix just came out with this whole thing about like recommendations, which we can talk about later as well. But that's the thing, right? Like the more you can talk back to the system, it's huge, right? I mean, like, and so if this, because the other thing about this, Jaeden, about this coming back to the Gemini Nano scam thing, I was just looking up other kind of aspects of it. And one of the things is under user control. It says when a notification or website is flagged as suspicious, the users are given options to proceed, unsubscribe, or allow future notifications if they believe the warning was incorrect. And just to hover on that for one more second, the better and I just want to warn, and not that we have sort of like a ton of, geriatric old folks like listening to this, or people who might get scammed listening to this show necessarily, but just to sort of say, this has happened to me one time before where I was so sure. I'm like, no, but I know this person and it really does seem legitimate. And Google's like, dude, do not click on this. I'm like, but it's this guy and he's talking to me about something I know. And they're like, I'm telling you, don't click on it. Right. So I was like, okay, well, let me just give it a second. So I just wrote back. I'm like, hey, just want to make sure this is you. And the guy's like, that wasn't me. And I was
Really?
shocked, right? So, and this is somebody coming from me who I really pay a lot of attention to this. And the fact that it was coming from somebody I knew and his system got hacked was talking to us about something that he and I would have talked about usually. And him say, it was as if you, Jaeden, had emailed me and said like, hey, Connor, listen, I know we're doing the podcast this Thursday or this Friday. Let's talk about this because this is a great topic. And I wouldn't have hesitated, right?
Right,
So,
right.
and when it says you should decide, I just want Google also to sort of think, let me tell you all the reasons why this might not be Jaeden. I know it looks like Jaeden. I know it sounds like Jaeden. I know the topic
Right.
is Jaeden. But in the email, there's a little, in the metadata, I just want to flag. So I just want to, I'm hoping Gemini does this and doesn't just trust the user, because I think these things are just going to get more and more like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, as the scams get more elaborate too, you're going to need, because like that scam in particular that you mentioned, like they could hack into emails and they could have an AI model read through the email, know all the context, and send
Right.
something that's
Right.
most likely to get a link click. So yeah, the AI could be used for bad. So that's cool that Google's got that, got the other side of that. The other thing that Google is doing that I wanted to mention is they've launched a fighting scams in search report. And so they have this whole document. They're talking about everything that they've done to fight scams in the search results. So I think beyond just scams on your computer, they're also fighting that because a lot of people's big complaint is, oh my gosh, the whole internet just turned into AI generated articles, blah, 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 blah. So Google's also cutting down on that. I think they said one of their big scams that's out there right now that they're fighting. So, PSA to the world listening to this is impersonating airline customer support providers. And they said that they've apparently reduced that scam by about 80% in the search results. But that's so fascinating. They're essentially just pretending to be your customer support for your airline. They make all these web pages that look like they're supposed to be from the airline. You click on them. The customer support one is really tricky. And it's also very clever for scammers because oftentimes people, like a lot of airlines or other companies, don't actually use their website domain for their customer support page. They'll use like Zendesk or like one of these third-party customer support software portals. But the problem is I could go and make a Zendesk thing that's like American Airlines.
Yes. Yeah.
Customer support,
total
and
scammer
then
thing, yeah.
at zendesk.com, and then get that to rank in Google, and boom, you can then get people on the phone, get their credit card, and scam them.
But this is, yeah, it's unbelievable. Jaeden, this is the thing, right? And I know we're wrapping up here, but this is where it keeps coming back to. It keeps coming back to this fact that this is an arms race. We keep coming back to the fact that like we need Gemini and other places like that on our side. And I just think this is a huge public relations coup. All right, listen, we've been talking for a while. Let me say this. Guys, if you haven't checked out Jaeden's school community for AI Hustle is one of Jaeden's podcasts. It's one of my favorite podcasts just because he and Jamie are constantly talking about just like cool things to do and how you can not just make money, but like how to think about your own business about this. But the school community is really, really cool. $19 a month. They have hundreds of folks on there. Super, super cool. And one of the coolest things about this is that they're delivering all this content that you just don't. And I know people say, yeah, you don't get anywhere else. My favorite talks with Jaeden are offline. They're the ones where Jaden's like, hey, here's how I did this. Here's how I did this. And he and I exchange stuff. And then I find out that he's actually putting this on school. So $19 a month is absolutely nothing for this. I'm telling you, I would pay so much just to hear Jaeden talk about this stuff all the time. I get to because we're buddies. But this is a way to get inside his brain. Go check it out on the School, SKOOL community. And we will see you next time.